paper started with a really good thesis statement here. And so the next thing we need to do is go and look at what we need to do to get this contextualization point or the context point. And we can do that by looking at what the rubric asks us to do. Now let's pull up that rubric. And the rubric says for context that we need to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. We must, the response must relate to the topic of the prompt to a broader historical events, developments, or processes that occur before, during, or continue after the time frame of the question. So if you remember earlier, I said we need to set the stage. We need to talk about what's going on in the world here and fit our prompt into it. And if you've been paying attention to the video here, you've noticed that I keep going back to the prompt. I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that you know what that prompt is and you're constantly checking it. The number one way I see smart kids get bad scores on DBQs is because they don't answer the question. They almost answer the prompt, but they don't. A good example, I was grading some DBQs earlier this week. The question was about causes for the causes leading to increased trade between the years 600 and 1450. And so what caused this trade? Well, a lot of my students ended up instead saying what the trade caused. So they said trade caused the spread of ideas. Well, that's true, but that's not what caused the trade. And so that hurt them. Smart kids getting a bad score just because of the prompt. Okay, so I'm looking at the prompt here, and it's saying evaluate the extent to communist movements affecting women's struggle for rights. So I think it's probably pretty obvious here, depending on where you are in the school year, that communism is built on the idea of equality, community, and throughout the history of communism, let me add a little extra pizzazz here and talk about the founder, since its founder, Karl Marx, first wrote about it in the Communist Manifesto. Communism built on the idea of equality and community. And throughout the history of communism, since its founder Karl Marx wrote about it, first wrote about it in the Communist Manifesto, it has been centered on treating all members of society fairly. Okay, so we can talk about how there's been this stream of equality through communism. And now I want to talk about the 20th century here. However, until the 20th century, and for some time even in the 21st century, many female members of communist movements did not see that equality come through. Okay? Another thing that I'm thinking about here is the Neolithic Revolution, and how Karl Marx actually argued that before the Neolithic Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution, Men and women were much more egalitarian. And it's even a lot of modern historians talk about that. So I could talk about that. Um, but I think for here, this is a pretty good setup. And maybe even talk about how in the rest of the world, just like the rest of the world in the 20th century, just like the rest of the world in the 20th century, women within communist countries, or let's say some women within communist reached out for equal rights in different ways. Okay, that's a very good context. I think it's showing what we need to talk about here, and it goes right into our thesis statement. So if we take off where this says thesis statement, back that puppy up, and take off where this says contextualization, and indent that, boom, we got our first paragraph, and really good foundation for a paper here. So let's go from there and start looking at what we need to do for each document that we use in our groups and how to set up our paragraphs.